Week 1 is officially here, which means it is time to set your fantasy football lineups with matchups that matter. If you guys were following the channel last year, this is where we break down everything from over-unders, implied totals, where the sharps are betting, advanced data points, shadow coverage, must start, kind of flex options, running back, wide receiver, quarterback, and tight end matchups that we want to exploit, ones that we maybe don't want to exploit. It is back. It is an exciting time of the year where we get to talk about some real football for a change. Our weekly rankings manifesto is now live. You can get access to it one of two ways listed down below. Everything that I'm covering in today's video is from our weekly rankings manifesto. You can use this information to determine who you want to start and who you want to sit. Say, for example, you're deciding between Aaron Jones and David Montgomery. Make a checklist, go through each of these data points, and that will help you set your fantasy football lineup. So the week 1 slate is absolutely packed. We got a Thursday game, a Friday game, Sunday night, Monday night, and then, of course, a main slate on Sunday. The top 5 over-unders and the bottom 5 over-unders are on my left and on my right, respectively. You can see that Lions-Rams game on Sunday night, high over-under, the only one over 50 points. Miami-Jacksonville, another high one. Arizona and Buffalo, a very high over-under game as well. And then Indianapolis-Houston, and then Philadelphia-Green Bay on Friday night. All these games are ones that you want to attack with your start-sit decisions. If you are deciding between somebody in these games versus somebody not in these games, there's a very good chance that you should go for the point total, go for the high over-under, because Vegas isn't in the business of losing money. Same goes for the low over-under games. If you have players that are on the Bengals, the Patriots, the Chargers, the Raiders, the Saints, the Panthers, the teams that you guys can see on my right, there's a good chance that you probably want to steer away from those guys if you have a start-sit decision that involves a fringe player. Obviously, you're still going to play Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and those type of guys, but if you have a guy on the fringe, that is the direction you want to steer away from. Same goes for the implied point totals. Of course, these are based on the over-unders. The Bills, the Lions, the Dolphins, the Eagles, and the Texans, the usual suspects, the usual culprits of scoring a lot of points, are implied for 25 or more points this week. So again, fire up all of the players from those teams. You want to be putting James Cook, Dalton Kincaid, some of the wide receivers if you have a flex decisions. Detroit Lions, you want to be throwing in your Amon-Ra St. Brown, your Sam Laporta, your Jahmyr Gibbs, and your David Montgomery. The guys with lower implied point totals coming from the Patriots, Broncos, Raiders, Panthers, and Steelers. This is why we talked about during the draft cycle that we don't always want to be picking players from these teams, is because they're not going to be implied for a lot of points week over week. I'm sure I'm going to say a lot of those team names again every week for the next 16, 17 weeks of the season, but the Vegas totals are not always perfect, and where the sharps are betting can definitely be a huge indication of which games could go over and shoot out, which games maybe are set a little bit too high and could end up disappointing, and this is particularly useful, I would say, for DFS. You can see that Saints-Panthers game also set at a low over-under, but it is expected to go higher according to where the sharp money is posted. Same with that Seahawks and Broncos game. The Colts and Texans and the Dolphins and Jags game, checking a lot of boxes. Already a very high over-under, and the sharp money is currently on the over right now. So Colts, Texans, Dolphins, Jaguars, you want to make sure that those guys are in your fantasy football lineups. And it looks like the first game of the week and the last game of the week of the entire week 1 slate are the only 2 games in which the sharp money is on the under. So it appears that Vegas and sharp bettors think that this is going to be a relatively high scoring week 1. The 49ers and Jets on Monday night is expected to go under according to the sharp money. And then the Chiefs and the Ravens tonight is expected to go under according to the sharp money as well. Next, we get into some of the advanced data points, and some of these can be really good indications of game environment as well, because the faster pace of play that we see from both offenses, there's a higher chance there's going to be a lot more fantasy production, because the more plays, the more fantasy points. You can see Browns, Dallas, Colts, Texans, so on and so forth, profiled to be the highest, fastest paced games of the entire week. So even though that Browns-Dallas game doesn't necessarily have a high total, we could see a lot of points just by the fact that both offenses run very up-tempo. And again, this Colts and Texans game is checking a lot of boxes. So if you have a start-sit decision involving anybody from those 2 teams, you should probably lean with their with a Colt or with a Texan. And then some of the slowest pace games of the week, you can see that Seahawks-Broncos game not checking a lot of boxes. Same goes with the Bengals and Patriots game, not looking like one that you want to invest in. And probably a reason for the Monday night game potentially going under is that the 49ers and Jets run very slow-paced offenses. So looking at the next group of advanced data points, we have offensive DVOA, which means the offense on the far left versus the opponent's defensive DVOA, so their week 1 opponent, how good they were on defense. And it's worth noting that all of these numbers came from 2023, so there's a chance that this stuff changes with, new players added and offseason losses and things of that nature. This data will get more refined and more accurate the further we get into the season, because we will be using solely 2024's data at that point in time. But the Bills appear to have a massive advantage, biggest one on the slate by a lot, over the Arizona Cardinals defense. So again, the Buffalo Bills, very much a good offense to attack if you're looking for start-sit decisions. Philadelphia Eagles against the Packers also looks like a great spot to attack. You have the Dolphins versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, a good spot to attack. And even though the 49ers have a tough matchup against the Jets, they're a good enough offense that it looks like they could pull it out. And then the Lions versus the Rams also looks like a good spot to attack there. And conversely, Jets versus the 49ers, again, keep in mind that it's 2023's numbers, so we're talking about the 2023 Jets with Zach Wilson and Tim Boyle. That's how bad their offensive DVOA was. So those numbers, I would say, keep in mind the context of who was added in the offseason, who was lost in the offseason. So breaking down the shadow coverage and the wide receiver cornerback matchups, I think this is definitely one of the more underrated uses of fantasy football start-sit decisions, because a lot of the times these things can sway you one way or another, not only for the player who has the shadow matchup, but also potentially for some of their teammates. As you guys can see, Chicago Bears' DJ Moore is expected to be shadowed by L'Jarius Sneed, who now plays for the Titans. The Seattle Seahawks' DK Metcalf expected to be shadowed by the newly paid Patrick Surtain. Atlanta Falcons' Drake London expected to be shadowed by Joey Porter Jr. And then the Pittsburgh Steelers in that same game, George Pickens expected to be shadowed by AJ Terrell. So again, slight downgrade for all of these players. They have tough matchups, and also a slight upgrade for their teammates, because with DJ Moore, for example, it's not a bad matchup. The Titans were not good against fantasy wide receivers last year. In fact, they were dead last against fantasy wide receivers. But now they added L'Jarius Sneed, and if he's going to be on DJ Moore, that means Rome Odunze and Keenan Allen probably have better matchups, vice versa for JSN and the other tertiary wide receivers in those offenses. And we also have some downgrade matchups here. You guys can see anything in orange is just a bad matchup. The secondary is very good. Marvin Harrison Jr. and Michael Wilson versus the Bills secondary. Deontay Johnson versus the Saints cornerbacks. Worthy and Rice tonight on Thursday Night Football versus the Baltimore Ravens cornerbacks. Then you have Debo and Ayuk versus the Jets, and Lamb and Brandon Cooks versus the Cleveland Browns corners. So again, keep in mind all of these matchups when you're making your start-sit decisions. And then some of the best matchups, the ones that you want to be attacking: Mike Evans and Chris Godwin versus the Washington secondary. Great matchup there. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith versus the Green Bay Packers secondary, Jefferson and Addison versus the New York Giants secondary, and then Chris Olave versus the Carolina secondary as well. And most of these matchup upgrades and downgrades were pulled from fantasypoints.com wide receiver cornerback matchup shadow matrix and advantage charts. So definitely check that out if you guys want more information on wide receiver cornerback matchups. This year, as opposed to going through like quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and just going through like the rank and weighted average and talking about who has good matchups and bad matchups, I feel like it's probably more valuable for you guys if I go through my 5 biggest starts and my 5 biggest sits based on all of this information. Again, the weekly rankings manifesto is extremely accessible if you just want that information of who has a good and who has a bad matchup. It is available with a Flock sign-up link down below, or an Underdog sign-up link down below. So instead, like I said, I'm going to go through and use all the information that I've done on the slate so far and use all the research I've done on the slate so far and tell you 5 players that I'm starting at wide receiver and running back, so to help you fix your flex, and 5 players that I probably want to be sitting to avoid putting in your flex this week. And then I'll also highlight some defensive streamers, some kicker streamers, and some quarterback streamers if you guys are looking for those type of plays. 5 must-start flex options for half and full PPR leagues. So in order, my number 1 option here would be ranked higher than my number 5 option. So if you have multiple players that I talk about, probably go with the number 1 option that I have. So my number 1 option this week, one of my favorite starts of the week in terms of like flex production. All of these guys will be ranked outside my top 24 running backs and wide receivers respectively. So I'm not going to be talking about obvious names. Like I'm pretty sure you guys know to start like Michael Pittman this week, for example. Christian Kirk at the Miami Dolphins, to me, is one of the better starts in terms of flex territory guys. 49.5 over-under. Jacksonville is implied for 23.25 points. Both teams are used to playing in the heat, so not really a worry that they're playing in Miami as like a cold weather team or something. The Sharps are on the over in this game at 84% of the money, and I think that Kirk will have a very big role early on in the season as Brian Thomas Jr. gets acclimated to the NFL. So with the Dolphins defense as bad as it's been, especially towards the back half of the season last year, They're missing a lot of pieces. They're missing their pass rush. So to me, Christian Kirk represents one of the better starts this week because that is a high-scoring game that, as you recall, checked a lot of boxes as I was going through it. Then we have number 2 must-start of the week, DeAndre Swift versus the Tennessee Titans, the newly minted Chicago Bears running back, with the Chicago Bears sneakily projected for 25 implied points according to Vegas. So I do like the ability of the Titans to allow a lot of points, the Bears to potentially get out to a hot start to begin their season, and DeAndre Swift has a good chance to punch in a touchdown in that game. So I like him outside my top 24 running backs. Chris Godwin versus the Washington Commanders. I mean, the Commanders were horrible against wide receivers last year. They were like the worst team in the NFL against the fantasy wide receiver position. I think the Buccaneers have a lot of good continuity on their offense, so I think that Tampa Bay is going to get out to a very good start, time of possession-wise especially. They're at home against a team starting a rookie quarterback in his first NFL game, so I think that Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, even Baker Mayfield, who I'll talk about in a little bit, are definitely good options this week, and you're going to want access to that offense. Jerome Ford versus the Dallas Cowboys is my number 4 guy here. I believe he's going to get a good workload, just generally speaking. Nick Chubb is out. Deontay Foreman was cut and then brought back. I think that Jerome Ford will be the lead back here for the next couple of weeks. And even though the Cowboys project to be a pretty good defense, especially against the run, I love the game environment. As I talked about, that is the single fastest paced game of the entire slate, and I think that both the Browns and the Cowboys offenses could get out to nice little starts here, especially with the Cowboys changing defensive coordinators this offseason. It's possible that Mike Zimmer's defense is not nearly as good as Dan Quinn's defense was against the run. And then my final number 5 must-start player in my flex is Jayden Reed against the Philadelphia Eagles. We have our first ever, at least to my knowledge, Friday night football game in Brazil, and I love Jayden Reed's ability to get on the field early. The Philadelphia Eagles are not very good against slot wide receivers, and that game is projected for 48.5 points and expected to go over with 68% of the money on the over. So I want pieces of that Packers offense. Jayden Reed is the most solidified, at least in terms of where we were drafting him going into the NFL season. So those are some guys that I think can fix your flex option this week, guys that you want to have in your lineup. 5 must-sits that I don't think you need to mess with necessarily, especially week 1. We already have all of our players healthy for the most part. You guys just had your drafts. It's not like we have to dig deep on players to potentially start this week. The teams and players I won't be messing with are any Chargers running back versus the Las Vegas Raiders. It's a low-scoring game. It's the lowest on the slate. Not to mention, we have no idea how this split is going to go. We don't know if Dobbins is going to be the lead back, Gus Edwards is going to be the lead back, Kamani Vidal is going to be involved at all. Don't mess with the Chargers backfield until you see what it looks like, especially not in this game environment. It is the lowest over-under game on the slate. Also tied for the lowest over-under game on the slate is the Cincinnati Bengals. And the Cincinnati Bengals also have a very murky backfield that we don't know how the split is going to be between Chase Brown and Zach Moss. So I would not mess with the Bengals running backs unless you absolutely have to. Chase Brown is the guy that I would start, but it's a low over-under game. I don't expect that this backfield is going to be, 75% one guy. It's probably going to be a 50-50 split in the first game. So don't mess with the Bengals backfield until we have more information on it. And same goes for the Cowboys backfield. Again, similar theme here. We don't have any information on these backfields. We didn't see a whole lot of usage in preseason games. And the Cowboys running backs are going up against the Cleveland Browns, third best defense in the NFL against fantasy running backs last year. I don't know if Dowdle's going to be the lead guy. I don't know if Zeke is going to be the lead guy. How much work does Dalvin Cook get? There's no reason to start a Cowboys running back until we kind of know what the split looks like. And same goes for a lot of these rookie wide receivers. Rome Odunze, Ladd McConkey, Keon Coleman, some of the other guys, Brian Thomas Jr., we aren't totally sure of their roles yet, so I would make sure to conservatively kind of rank them outside of my top 40 wide receivers, at least for week 1, until we have more information, more clarification on if Rome Odunze is going to start on the outside, if Brian Thomas Jr. is going to start on the outside, if Keon Coleman is going to start on the outside, if Ladd McConkey is going to be a top 2 wide receiver option for the Los Angeles Chargers. If you don't have to start these guys week 1, don't do it until we have more information. Start a guy who's a little bit more proven like a Cortland Sutton over those guys, or start a guy that's a little bit more proven like a Chris Godwin who I talked about, or a Christian Kirk who I talked about. It's week 1. There's no reason to get super, super risky and tank a good first week of your fantasy football season. Let's pivot into some of the streamers this week at the quarterback position. Again, it is week 1, so there's no need to go dumpster diving for like Russell Wilson or Gardner Minshew or something like that. But if you do need a quarterback option for whatever reason this week, you didn't, pay up at the quarterback position, or you're just kind of choosing to stream the quarterback position, The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I talked about, very good matchup. So Baker Mayfield is in a very good spot here. Geno Smith and the Seattle Seahawks also in a very good spot. And Matthew Stafford and the Los Angeles Rams also in a very good spot in the highest over-under game of the entire slate. So any one of those three quarterbacks would be just fine. I would probably rank them Stafford, Geno Smith, and Baker Mayfield, and all of them will be inside probably of my top 20 quarterbacks in my final rankings. Streams of the week at defense, for those of you guys that don't know what streaming defenses means, it just means that you're picking up a different defense every week, targeting bad quarterbacks, targeting bad offenses, targeting low over-under games. The Minnesota Vikings against the Giants is a perfect one. High blitz-heavy team against a turnover-prone quarterback who's also got a lot of moving parts on the outside. The Vikings, probably the premier defense that's widely available in a lot of leagues right now. The San Francisco 49ers against the Jets, probably heavily owned, but definitely a good play. Buccaneers against the Commanders, again, rookie quarterback, first game, blitz-heavy defense, a lot of turnover opportunities there. Tennessee Titans against the Chicago Bears, again, rookie quarterback in his first game, but I do expect that the Bears will put up points, so maybe steer clear of that one. And then the New Orleans Saints against the Carolina Panthers. We saw what Bryce Young looked like last year, and the Saints have a good defense, so they are a pretty solid one. Like I said, I think the best two options here are probably the Vikings and Buccaneers because they're at home, they're favored, potential low over-under games as well there. So Vikings and Buccaneers, probably the streaming defenses that I really like the most, especially ones that are widely available. Then we talk about kickers. Again, you don't get kicker talk anywhere else here. Cairo Santos, Kiami Fairbairn, and Chase McLaughlin of the Bears, Texans, and Buccaneers respectively have the top three matchups, and all of those teams are projected to win. All of those teams have a chance to be in high-scoring game environments. The best one for sure is definitely Kiami Fairbairn because that game is checking every single box you could want it to, from over-under, implied point total, high-pace game, high-scoring environment in terms of where the sharps are betting as well. So Kiami Fairbairn is probably the best kicker that you could go up and pick up off the waiver wire this week. So again, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully you got some value from it. Any start-sit questions you have, leave them down below. If you are looking for rankings tier list videos, the wide receiver one will be coming out tomorrow. Danny, of course, heads that one up every year, and I will be doing the running back one on Saturday. Some content creators are throwing their tier lists out early. I usually like to do them Friday and Saturday because we have the most information on who's playing and who's not playing and things of that nature. So stay tuned for those videos. We will have you covered with that. We will be live for tonight's game as well, so make sure, if you guys are new around here, we're live before Thursday Night Football every single week, live before the Sunday main slate every single week, and live before Monday Night Football every single week. So make sure you're tuned in for that. And of course, we will answer as many start-sit questions as we can in the comments during the live stream as well as during this video. And as I tease throughout this, if you want access to all of this data, all of our weekly rankings, we get them updated early in the week so that you guys can set your lineups, and we update them pretty much daily up until Sunday morning kickoff and after inactives have been announced. So make sure to check out our weekly rankings manifesto. Right now, you can get that on flockfantasy.com, which is linked down below, or you can get it for free when you sign up using promo code FSE for underdogfantasy.com and make a $10 deposit. It'll be in your email inbox within 24 hours. And if you already used our promo code FSE to get our draft guide, I sent out a blast with all of our code users to the emails that you guys signed up with, and you should have access to our weekly rankings manifesto for signing up for our draft guide the last couple of weeks or the last calendar year or so. So if you're looking for the email, just check your email inbox, check your spam folder, all that kind of stuff. Leave a like if you enjoyed, comment any thoughts down below, subscribe if you are new around here. Peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.